Dear church, let's talk domestic missions with Russell Epperson. Dear church, let's talk Holy Spirit, transformation, prayer.
6 days, right?
And if you love me, you will keep my commandments.
Our culture wants to define you by your sexuality. We know that our identity is found in Christ.
Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris McCurley, and I am joined by a special guest today, a friend of mine, Russell Epperson, who is a missionary in Montana, of all places. Not overseas somewhere, but right here in the United States. Russell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's exciting to be able to talk a little bit about domestic missions and just what we've been doing here in Lewistown for the last, going on our 14th year here soon. So,
yeah, that's amazing. Hey, before we jump into our conversation, though, tell us about you. I know that before we got on camera, you're telling me how this office space you're renting is above a coffee shop, which is, I guess, good. I mean, it can be bad if you have a coffee addiction. But other than that, tell us what's going on in your life, about your family and all that.
Yeah. So my wife, Allison, a lot of folks would know her just from our life over in Henderson, Tennessee years ago. But Allison and my three kids, Caden, Brindley, and Tessa. Caden's a sophomore at Montana State in Bozeman. My daughter, Brindley, just graduated. We homeschooled all the kids, by the way. And she just graduated, is heading to MSU Bozeman this fall. And we have a 16-year-old at home, Tessa. And yeah, incidentally, both girls have worked at the coffee shop downstairs, but Brindley decided to stop working at the coffee shop this summer before her take off to college, and she's just mowing like 14 yards this summer. Gives her a little more freedom, and she's enjoyed that. And then my daughter Tessa is still working there. Yeah, we met at Freed-Hardeman University years ago, 27 plus years ago, and we're married and lived there in Henderson. Worked at Freed-Hardeman for 11 years, and then almost our 14th year in August, moved to Montana to become missionaries here to do the Lord's work here in the great white north.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about that story. How did you end up in Montana? Did you just kind of throw a dart and it landed in Montana and you said, that's where I'm going?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, that's kind of how it felt, honestly. But being at Freed-Hardeman, you're surrounded by Christians all the time. And it was a good thing. We enjoyed supporting them. I was a HR guy and a purchasing director, and life was easy. Life was good. Lots of good, close friends, all Christians. You know, everybody we knew was pretty much Christian or at least believed in God in some fashion. And so it was weighing on our hearts that we needed to do more, or that we could do more. And the Northwest kept coming to mind as I sat at my little desk at Freed-Hardeman, and I was like, I don't know what's in the Northwest. I've never been there, but something is there that we're supposed to be thinking about. And we started praying and thinking, and honestly, I'd always prayed, Lord, use me however you want, as long as it's right here in West Tennessee and I don't have to travel and I don't have to do anything out of my comfort zone. And so when I decided that, Lord, put us where you want us, we'll go. Literally 3 months later, we were living in Lewistown, Montana. So there's a lot of other details to that story that are give you kind of goosebumps, but we just believe that God put us where we needed to be, and we followed and were willing to do that at that time, whereas before probably hadn't been willing to do some of those things. I was not wanting to get out of my comfort zone as much. So a vacation Bible school, just found somebody after many phone calls. Larry, Larry's going to get on to me for Larry and Carol over in Lexington, Tennessee. He had been coming to Lewistown for 4 or 5 years, and he said, come do a vacation Bible school with us and we'll let you run it. And really we were working with the church full time 3 months later, and rented our house out, then sold our house in Henderson, and just everything came together. So it worked out really well.
Yeah. That's really neat that you found a place there in Montana. And give us a little bit of the lay of the land. I think it's easy being in the South, being in the Bible Belt, or even on the buckle of the Bible Belt. We're kind of in a bubble. You know, there's a Church of Christ within a few miles of each other, every street corner, it seems like. And I don't think we always realize that there is a huge mission field right here in the United States that you don't have to go to Ecuador or Guyana or somewhere like that. Just here in the northern United States, the
Right.
church is not as prevalent if it's there at all. So give us a little bit of what you're up against being a missionary in Montana.
Yeah, so we kind of started trying to do numbers, and through the years I've tried to come up with how many churches of Christ that we have here in the state, and we do a lot of things together. So I would say there's less than 35 churches of Christ in the state now. And I remember doing some numbers in, say Madison County, Chester County, Davidson County, some of these areas in Tennessee, and there would be 35 churches of Christ in one county. And I'm pretty sure that's correct for like Chester County. I know it's, right around Freed-Hardeman, but still Nashville, there's no telling, how many are in that county. So we've had at least 2 to 3 churches of Christ close since we've been here in 13 years. And we haven't added any in that time frame. So we're consistently closing small churches across the state. The average attendance is probably close to, I would say, even with the big churches, we've got some close to 200 in Great Falls, Helena's not that large, but Billings and Belgrade, Bozeman area. But even with that, I would say the average attendance is 35 folks. There's a lot of small churches. There's a few home churches, but it's a struggle. Yeah. And as religion as a whole here, there was a great influence in some of the mainstream denominations like Lutheran and Presbyterian and Methodist, and especially Catholic. So we do have a pretty large population of those folks. But even their attendance is not what it would be in the South. The Catholic folks may have a lot of folks on their rolls, but those attending Mass is still a pretty low number comparatively. So, yeah, it can be a struggle as a whole. I think there's a much greater mentality that, God is in creation and we worship God in creation by going hunting and fishing and the great outdoors of Montana. And so I do hear that all the time. And honestly, I think those folks are sincere when they say it.
Sure.
But then they lack the community. They lack the growth, really, rather than just this. Maybe they think they have a good personal relationship, but they're really lacking in knowledge of Scripture and in the community of believers through the church. So, yeah, that's something that we're constantly fighting. But as far as getting together with the churches of Christ, I would gather with those ministers. We have a annual lectureship, and so our congregation is hosting that in October of this year. So we'll have 150 folks that will come to Lewistown, and we'll have an all-day Saturday event. And some will stay through Sunday morning. Some might come in Friday night. So things like that. Youth rallies, we probably have 5 of those across the state that we take kids to. We have a Bible camp, Yellowstone Bible Camp in Prairie, Montana, which is in the edge of Yellowstone. And several of our folks from the South have been there, and that's pretty cool. So I'm on their board. That's a community event through the Churches of Christ. We all technically own that camp together.
Yeah.
So we're very tight knit, even though we're smaller and we do have some challenges. We do get together and support each other really well.
Now, are you currently meeting at a building? Are y'all meeting at a home? What is your setup there?
Yeah. So when we moved here in 2011, we were meeting in a very small place. It had maybe 30 chairs, and we were growing to the point where we needed to move. So we moved into a Main Street location. So we have a downtown location, and it has enough seating for 70, 75, and it's very different. So we, being a downtown location, it's just a couple of doors and you're there. No mowing the grass, none of that. It's really nice because usually the preacher ends up doing some of that.
Yeah.
But I'm able to put some couches into the auditorium, if you want to call it that. It's just really one big room. And so we've got 2 or 3 couches. We have some bar height tables. Weird to say the word bar in a church setting, but a bar height table.
Yeah.
And our older folks love those bar height tables because they can put their books, their Bibles out in front of them. They have somewhere to kind of sit up and be a little more available to listen. And then we have probably 30 or 40 typical padded chairs that, you'd see in most church buildings. So it's very different. We have
Yep.
potluck tables that we leave set up in the back, and people sit at those during the service. So it's all just one big happy family. Kids, a lot of times the families will sit in the couches, and we have rugs in front of them, and the kids will sit in the floor during the service and, keep themselves busy, listen.
Yeah.
As homeschoolers, I know when kids look like they're busy, honestly, usually they're listening still.
Sure.
Our kids would always be doing something, and mom would say, you're not even paying attention. And they would say, and they would repeat what she had just said. And so we have a very different setup, but it looks much more like a family, much more like a living room.
Right.
And we like that. And then you go into the back and there's a little kitchen area, bathrooms, that type of thing. And we have actually a basement as well that has half of it is for like a kids area, ping pong table, couches and such. And then we have the unfinished part in the other half. So 2 big floors, pretty large space. And we rent that. And that was kind of intentional, is owning a building and doing mission work can be very expensive and taxing on me, frankly. So renting the building has been very nice, and it's well used. We're running about anywhere from, say, 30 on a Sunday to 60.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we had everybody there, we'd be in the 70s, honestly. But most Sundays we're in the 40 range. And then when everybody gets to town, which is different for us compared to some, we have probably half our members drive over 40 miles to get to service. So some of them 50, and most of them it takes them 45 minutes to an hour to get to service. And then the other half live right there in town. So it's a kind of interesting dynamic. But we usually we've had 59. We can't break that 60 barrier. We've gotten close, but we've hit 59 a few times. And when that happens, the building is very full. It's very exciting, a lot of encouragement. And then other times, sicknesses, ranchers that are calving. That's always a time when they're gone for weeks on end because they're literally having calves, all day long, all night long. So they are up and down all night long checking on those, because one calf can, it's a lot of money. It's $1,000 to sell later on. So they have to be present to make sure they get those babies on the ground healthy. So.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of adapting and adjusting from, leaving Freed Hardeman to go to Montana and, getting your bearings about you, figuring out how do I integrate in this community? What does church look like here? I would imagine if you've got people driving from that distance, you're not meeting at the typical times. What does that look like on Sunday and Wednesday or during the week even?
Yeah, it's a good point. We do meet Sunday mornings. We start at 10:30 really with just coffee and fellowship. And that's intentional because they only come in usually once a week for most folks. It's a time to gather. It's a time to share and spend time together. So coffee pots going early, and then we have snacks that we have people sign up to bring every week. And then at 11 o'clock, we have worship together. And I'm usually 5 or 10 minutes over at noonish, somewhere in there. And then we stand around and talk. Some of them for another 45 minutes to an hour after service, because again, they've driven so far. And a lot of the ranchers, that may be their first time in for the week, and they go to the grocery store and get all of their stuff they need. We're not, it sounds like we horse and wagon, but we have plenty of locations in Lewistown. We're kind of the hub for central Montana, and we're about 5,000 people, grocery stores, big ones like Kroger or whatever, but we don't have a Walmart. So that's the big difference. We have the Ace Hardwares and True Values, and we have one called the Variety Store, which is kind of like a Fred's and or a dollar store. We're not inundated with the dollar stores like you all are. So there's one like Family Dollar in town, but it's not the typical ones that just pop up. And so we have plenty of shopping, and all the outlying ranchers come in to buy their stuff for the week. And then Wednesday nights, 5:30, we do a meal. So we do a meal every Wednesday night. And then at
Okay.
6 o'clock, we do a small Bible study for everybody. So we're watching The Chosen right now,
Yeah.
and just doing our best to watch that and then talk for about half hour afterwards to just discuss what we watched. And that's been very popular. And but attendance on Wednesday night is very low comparatively, so we might have 15 people. And
Okay.
those are the folks that are in town and kind of that mindset of really wanting to develop and study more. But Sundays we have the worship and the fellowship, and it is a different mentality. We don't do Sunday nights. Yeah, as you know, those ranchers and others are not going to come back for that just because of time and money. They just don't have the resources to be able to do that. But we try to just be in each other's lives as well, and as best we can during the week. And so coffee, and ladies have Bible studies and all kinds of other independent things that they do together. So we make it work out, and it is a different mentality. A lot of our folks have grown up in different church settings, some no church setting. Very few grew up in a Church of Christ. So that's very unique here. And because of that, 4-part harmony is not something many people have ever even thought about.
Right.
Some of them have no singing abilities. We have made a difference with using the Praise and Harmony website from Keith Lancaster. And so what we do is just play those songs and sing with them. So they are our
Okay.
song leader.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be me and one other fella that are not great song leaders. We do our best.
I'm with you there.
Hard to get everything and do it well. And so when we sing those songs, they're always on key, they're always on time, and people have loved that and sing along with it. And it helps them learn to sing as well. And there are times when we sing a cappella just without anything, but as a rule, we use that website and sing along with those songs.
Yeah, Russell, I know you had to come in and figure out a strategy, and you've probably had to do that for the last 14 years. It probably changes a little bit and everything, but coming from the South, going to the Northwest, you're in Montana, you don't have a language barrier. They all speak the same language. Culturally, there's a lot of similarities being an American, but it is a different part of the world. I've been to Idaho a few times, love it up there, love the Northwest, but you do feel like that you're kind of remote. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like I am far away from a lot of things. What has been your approach? What was kind of maybe the biggest thing you had to do to reach people in that area to figure out how to, quote unquote, speak their language?
Yeah. I think the Lord prepared us well. My growing up years, I showed cattle in 4-H, and we had cows and I was around them. So moving to this area, I didn't realize how much that was a part of life, was ranching. It's huge. I mean, we're one of the biggest states with cows and raising beef and such. So getting into that, being willing to go to brandings, everybody has to brand out here. So it's a big cultural event. They feed everybody. Hundreds of people sometimes will be working at one branding. A lot of family comes in. And so we attend those brandings. I've sorted cows. I've held down the calf while they put the branding irons on it and just get dirty and nasty with them. So being willing to be like Paul, just being willing to adapt and become like those folks. But we've loved it. It's a very simple life. It's slower pace, and we've loved that. I remember we moved into the house that we lived in when we moved here in 11. And I remember sitting upstairs in that small office thinking, how am I going to reach these people? And I thought, well, I'm not going to do it sitting here. So I went down to the coffee shop I'm sitting above and just started showing up for coffee every morning and meeting people. And that's honestly kind of how we started doing evangelism, was going to the coffee shop, going to Albertsons, that back then that was the only grocery store. And you could meet anybody you wanted to at Albertsons. It was the great equalizer because everybody had to come buy groceries at some point.
Right.
And even now, that's the case. I was there yesterday, and you're saying hello to, it's like a small town, even though it's 6,000 people. A lot of them, and if you don't know them, you know somebody that does know them, and it's a nice small community. But the people here are different. They are not, as some would consider, hospitable as others. And what's really going on is it's just a tendency to be a little distrustful. Like, who are you? Why are you moving to our little part of the world, and
Yeah.
what are you trying to do? Are you trying to bring in your values and force us to change? Because it's very resistant to change here. So being willing to just adjust and go with the flow, be a part of it, become a Montanan. Really, it's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. We've moved here, raised our kids, and many ministers will come in and work for 3 to 5 years and then leave. And people know that. And so the first 5 years, all we were doing was saying, we're not leaving. We're not leaving. We're going to be here. And once we got past that, people started to trust us. And now, I get community members call me often. I probably do about half of my work with non-church members.
Yeah.
People that call me and want to have a wedding or just having a hard time or need some counseling. And I'm not a professional counselor, but I listen and I give advice if I can from scripture. So pastoral counseling. And it's been a huge blessing just to kind of be a community minister is what I feel like I am, really. And our folks
That's really neat.
are mature, and I don't need to hold their hand. That's another kind of a difference is like, hey, you're a Christian, do your thing. I don't have to hold your hand, and I'll guide and teach when I can, but I need you busy. I need you working because we can't do it alone. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So Russell, when you devise lessons, sermons, you mentioned 4-part harmony. That's kind of foreign to them. I imagine you don't spend your week every week pounding the pulpit and focusing as an issues-oriented preacher, because it is a different culture and it's a different mindset, and you're trying to bring these people along from really ground zero religiously and spiritually. So what do your lessons focus on? I mean, where do you try to grab people when it comes to discipleship and things of that nature?
Yeah. I was during COVID, we were teaching, and we had some folks leave one of the congregations in town, and like 5 of them ended up coming to us. And it was a very conservative group that was leaving, and their denomination was going a different direction. And after a few weeks, they said, we are just blown away. You actually preach from scripture. And I was like, well, I thought everybody did, but that's not the case these days, So honestly, pretty simple preaching. I have been not even really criticized, but just awareness that I am going to teach where the folks are. And so sometimes that means I'm not into the deeper things as much as some of the other folks maybe in the South or other places, but real life stuff, the things that they're dealing with. A lot of folks are still dealing with behaviors that they need to change. And so transformation from the Spirit, transformation through the Word, and just talking about real things. I give a lot of examples from real life. I talk about ranching a lot, farming, just the real things. In fact, I think I try to do like Jesus did with his stories. He just made it real, and he did talk about some of the deeper things at times, but mostly he was just talking to the people's hearts. So I'm a very empathetic, very emotional person. So mostly I tell stuff that's important to me, very personal. I'm not afraid to cry in the pulpit, probably do that most weeks and to some degree, to show my heart to folks, and it just comes out. It's just natural. And it's a simple way of teaching, which I think the gospel message is pretty simple.
Yeah, I do too.
Some of the differences, if you don't mind, is like the invitation song. We don't do an invitation or an invitation song every week. This past Sunday, I did do a kind of a forced plea because I knew I had visitors there that needed to hear that. But most weeks, I know every single person in the audience, and you already know. I grew up where, they would do the invitation, and it's like, if anybody's here that doesn't know Jesus, and I'm looking around like, everybody here knows Jesus.
Right.
Doing this,
Yes. Because it's tradition and we have to, right?
And it seems silly,
Yeah.
But even as a teenager or a young person, I knew that. But yeah, so most Sundays I know who's there. I know kind of what their walk looks like. And I'll make that impassioned plea from time to time and say, please come talk to us after service. Getting up and walking in front of people here is probably not going to work. Much different in terms of their willingness to do those kinds of things, a little more reserved emotionally. And that's changing some, but still very different here. That cowboy mentality is very strong in Montana. So
Yeah.
we fight against that probably more than anything. Pride, I'll do it myself. I don't need help. So we work through some of those cultural issues. And that invitation song is just not a part of it. And we still baptize folks as much or maybe more than some congregations because we are dealing with a lot of new Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges. What have been the biggest blessings since you've been there? What are some of the things that you could highlight and say, man, these are just life-changing moments?
Seeing God work. We've got a young man. He's 36 now, I think. He's not too young anymore. And he would be autistic as we would look at him, or, some birth defects when he was born. So he's different in some ways. His mother as well. She has some vision issues and different things. Knowing that folks like that, they have brought people to Jesus, just in their loving willingness to invite folks to church, seeing Jesus work through some of the brokenness. I've got some great friends, and they attend another restoration type church here in town. Could talk about that too, but they were both meth addicts and were in prison 8 years ago. And now I went over there Saturday night. My family was out of town at a soccer event, and I sat over there till midnight looking at the stars, talking to this buddy of mine who was in prison years ago and now is following Jesus and raising his 3 children to follow Jesus. So seeing God work through some very simple folks, very broken folks, by far has been the best blessing. And that's really kind of who I gravitate towards, to be honest. Our church might look different than some, as in it's going to be a little folks that don't have as much money, folks that have struggled in life. And so that's kind of the group that we reach out to a lot of times. A lot of benevolence, giving away beef. A rancher will give us 100 pounds of ground beef, and we'll put it in our church freezer, and I'll give that out to people in need. I did that Sunday. We had a young man that's homeless, and I've known him for 5 years, but he's homeless right now, couch surfing. And so I said, hey, can we give you some beef? And he said, yeah. So loaded him up, 6 or 8 pounds of beef and sent him on his way. And so that's probably the blessing that I think is just being the hands and feet of Jesus. I don't sit in an office a whole lot. This one I'm renting, I started in November because our church building is wide open. There's no closed in office areas. And I was like, I'm getting old enough. I need some organization. Renting this little place has been a huge blessing, but just being able to reach out and help people in the community. I do chaplain work for the sheriff's office. I started a nonprofit to support that chaplain work, and recently just found out the Department of Justice in Montana, 900 plus employees, is starting a chaplain program.
Wow.
I interviewed, they accepted me. I'm being background checked right now very intensely. Fingerprinted, the whole works. They're calling people and checking on me, but Lord willing, I'll probably be serving as a chaplain. And that's like an on-call thing just here in Lewistown. It's not going to take away from, it'll add to the ministry, I hope. But that's just some of the things. I do a lot of nonprofit work and spend most of my time in the community. I don't sit and do a lot of sermon prep. My sermons are okay, I think, but they're, the focus is evangelism and being out in the communities. So it does limit what I can do in a lot of ways, but it also opens up a lot of doors, and we'll get ready to maybe baptize some people this year. We got some that I think are getting close, and we'll go out to one of the streams, one of the springs around town, and baptize them in 60-degree water or 50-degree water, whatever it is we need to do. So
you got to really want to be baptized, right?
You've had a lady we baptized in April, and it was raining and 50 degrees, and the water was about that too. And so you didn't celebrate a long time outside the water, but we did celebrate. So
one of the things that I hear you say that may be kind of the major theme of this episode is that, there's more than one way to do ministry, and ministry looks very different for you than it would for me. But we've talked about that on this podcast before with one of our other ministers, Chad Garrett, who was in the mission field for 10 years. And, so often we go to a place like the Philippines or somewhere like that, and we try to build an American church. We try to Americanize the people there because that's what we know. we throw money at it and we Americanize it. And, I think that has shown that it doesn't work necessarily. And so I love the way you've confronted this and talked about this, is that you've got to take people where they're at, and you've got to integrate, and you're still doing ministry, you're still doing church, you're still, in every way doing the scriptural things, but it just looks differently. And I appreciate you highlighting that. Hey, before I let you go though, Russell, we here at Walnut Street support this work. We love this work, but tell us how others, if they're interested in supporting what you do there, how they can do so.
Yeah, so we send out a newsletter probably 3 or 4 times a year now. Used to try to do that monthly, and man, it takes so much time to do those. But they could subscribe to that. If they go to Russell or Allison Epperson on Facebook, our church name is Central Montana Church of Christ. You can watch us every Sunday on Facebook. We stream that live, so anybody in the world can watch, and folks do, and they comment, and that's always encouraging. So you could leave a note there if you wanted to find out more about us. Our church website is montana.church. Pretty strong website there. We're the church in Montana. So montana.church. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, my email address is montanaminister@gmail.com. I also claimed that years ago. I thought that was a fun email address, but just Montana all spelled out, minister@gmail.com. And we can get you added to that, let you find out more about us. And we're supported by many churches back east. We're about up to 10 or 12 different churches, 4 or 5 here in Montana that support our work financially. And then the rest in Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, that type area, little Kentucky area as well. But we just love people to pray for us and just know that we're doing work out here, and that we know they're doing work back there, and that we're all working in the kingdom together, just doing our best to share Jesus. That's the goal. That's
awesome. Russell, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. If you have a specific question about today's episode, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a question for Russell, we will forward it on to him. I'm sure he'd be willing to answer any question that you might have. If you're in his area, stop and join them on a Sunday or have some coffee with them. Doesn't sound like you're hard to find. So
we'll work around somewhere.
So thank everyone for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.